Communication is the most common thing, but yet it's the hardest thing to do. And why? Because it's a two-way street. And most people tend to forget that. And they talk to someone, but they don't listen. And maybe the other person is listening, but when it's their time to speak, there's no listening to that one. So, we are going to talk about communication and how to improve it, taking tiny steps. But before I do, we are going to get into why your message may not land at all. And let me start by telling a little story about how difficult communication can be. Now, recently, Jumping Bunny was going to help me when I was creating a funnel and a way to make sure that you would get your handout. Now, this is the handout before you say so, but I see a paper boat. Well, that's correct. The actual handout looks like this, and it's a little bit adjusted. So this is Bunny in the paper boat. I love that idea of Bunny helping me out with the paper boat. So it was said on the cover is going to be a logo from Bunny. She is going to make sure there's a gift, and then she is going to say, welcome. I was like, okay, let's see how we can make that happen. Now, since Bunny is my inner kid, and well, Jumping Bunny is called Jumping Bunny because she's high on energy when she's excited and she's like, oh yes, we're going to do something, then you better hide because she wants to get it done straight away. No discussing it. So here we were, and I have been working on this, but it didn't look like this at all. I was like, I understand sort of how it's supposed to look, but how? So I had gone on the internet. I looked at several pictures where they explained what needed to be done, and one actually also had text underneath. So it was picture plus text. So I was like, okay, that probably works best. I look at the picture and then I'll just read the text and see what it says. Now, if you think it was easy, well, forget about it. And just to be specific, I never folded paper boats when I was growing up. I never did any origami. I think it looks amazing, but I never did so. Anyway, so I looked at it, started folding it, and then half an hour later, it still wasn't done. And I was supposed to meet up with a friend, pick her up at her house, and then we would drive over to a restaurant where we would have dinner together. So I arrived at her place, and well, actually on the way over, I was talking to the audio version of Brendan AI. So that's the AI of Brendon Burchard. I consider him my role model. And I've noticed that just talking to the AI actually really helps me to make sense of what I'm thinking about, needs to, well, basically what I need to get off my mind and maybe some clarity on. And while I was talking to the AI, I literally could visualize what I had missed. And I realized that when you look at this, then it needs to be folded in half. And from there on, you can fold the corners. And what had I done? I put it like this. And then I started folding the corners. The problem with that part was that when you've folded it and you folded the corners, there's a little something left on both ends. And both ends needed to be folded back. And because I started at the top, there was nothing at the bottom to fold. So I could do whatever I wanted. It didn't work. So when I saw the picture in my mind, I was like, oh, that's what I missed. I should have put the fold, so the middle part at the top. So I picked up my friend, and then when we arrived at the restaurant, I was like, oh, I really, really, really want to fold that paper boat, because now I know what I missed in everything. So Bunny is there. Bunny is like buzzing with excitement. And well, my friend looked at me and she said, can't you wait till after dinner? I said, you mean after midnight? I said, well, I'd rather not. It's just a few minutes. And she looked at me and she realized that when Bunny is involved, well, it's no use to wait, because I won't be able to get it out of my mind. I sort of can park it for a short while, and then whenever there's a break, I want to go at it. I really want to. So she looked at me. She said, okay, well, you know what? Since there's no way you're going to let it go, if you keep me entertained, I'll join you. Within minutes, we had done this. It was literally so quick. And, I took a few pictures with Bunny. There's actually a picture of Bunny on a glass of latte. It's in latte macchiato. And they made a heart. And she was looking in the glass like, oh, that's cool. And then she fell with her tiny little nose in the milk foam. Anyway, why am I bringing this up? Because it was one thing that was missing in the explanation that got me stuck. It was not that they didn't show that once it was folded, that, I had to fold the corners and then fold the flap back. It was that I had missed that it had to be done from the middle instead of the both ends. And I was like, why isn't it working? Because you couldn't see that on the picture, and it wasn't mentioned in the text. I mean, you could see what the front was, you could see what the back was, but you couldn't see why it didn't add up. So I went to a friend's house the next day, and I actually had asked her, can your kiddos help me figure this out? Because I've never made a paper boat. And they said, well, when you come over, then we are going to fold a paper boat. Well, it ended up being this little thing. And yeah, there's a little text on it, one tiny step daily. And I have to say, this was really cute. It was, with the paper and everything that has a back side and a front side. It's like, this is really cool. But in all fairness, this got torn because I knew what I needed to do. But then folding it from what I had folded and then really pull it into the right model, I was like, how did I do it? I looked at this but this paper is a lot thicker compared to this one. So the first time it didn't go really well, and then I put some tape on it, did it again, and then I managed to succeed. A few days later, I talked to someone and we got into communication. And by the time I already had I was thinking like, okay, I'm going to write a blog post about this, because communication, it's like I said, it's one of the hardest things to do. And there are a number of reasons for that. And when talking to that person, I basically came to a number of conclusions when thinking about it. So his main challenge or his main thought was, I've explained something once, maybe twice, maybe even thrice. I'm not going to do it again. If you're not hearing me, you're not hearing me. He also explained to me that there were some things that he wanted to do, but it was like that what he said, it never seemed to land on the receiver's end. And vice versa, I realized that what the other party involved was saying wasn't not landing on his side either. So if we look at that more closely, that conversation, then let's start by saying again, communication is a two-way street. We want it to be authentic, and the goal, the purpose behind communication is to be connected. And that's where a lot of times things do not go well. So how do we get connected? Not just by sitting across from one another, but actually also by looking at one another and by listening to one another. Now, I'm the first one to admit that when I'm at that friend where I go to on a weekly basis, we often do not look at one another. And sometimes when I really want to get something across, then I'll look at her and then I might wait. And at some point she will look up or I will repeat myself. And because I think it's really important, that one thing that I want to get across. And especially when I am using my hands, then I will need to tell her, well, if you look at my hands, I can show you what I'm talking about. Now, we don't have a problem when I go to her place and we talk about things. We know that we listen while we are talking. And when things get really complicated, then I'll put everything down and I really listen, like, what is she talking about? So I can make all those connections. So the time that we are not looking at one another, then usually we might be doing, I don't know, it could be diamond painting, it could be coloring something. It's just a little something to keep your mind occupied. And in our cases, listening just a little bit better. Yes, you can actually listen better. And this is not true for everyone, but some of us, if we keep our mind occupied just a little bit, then we can put our full attention to what someone is saying. So it's I guess it's a neurodivergent thing or something. It's not that uncommon, but the important thing is you have to have your listening ears, your listening cap on. Now, connection, the goal. And when you start talking to someone and you're not announcing it, then maybe someone is busy. So if for some reason the both of us can talk to one another, whether it's because there is another phone call or something is going on that requires attention, then we say that to one another, hang on for a moment, or I'll call you back later. But say that you have to do with colleagues or your spouse comes home and wants to say something and you are in the middle of something, then the question, of course, is this the right moment? If someone calls you and you are in the middle of doing something, the question is that at a convenient moment? And then they can start talking about all those things that they want to talk about. But the question becomes, is it landing? So one of the first things I usually do when I call someone, so I prefer actually sending a WhatsApp message. So it's sort of like an announcement. But when people don't see it, then and it's important enough, then at some point I will actually call them. And then I will say, is this a good moment? Yes, okay, I can go on. No, when can I call you? Then there's talking to someone. You may have the time, but maybe they are occupied with something else. And they are still processing whatever it is that's going on. And every once in a while, it does happen that someone is explaining something to me, and I'm talking about friends, for instance, and there's something that triggers me because they say something. Now, I sort of have learned to write it down or put it in my phone, but I can blurt it out. That's me too. As a coach, I know not to do it. And as a coach, I have pen and paper, so I can write it down. But as a friend, being very enthusiastic, I sometimes just want to, it's like knowing, oh, I understand what you mean, and this, that, and the other. And no, it's not the best way to behave. But sometimes we talk about things and then suddenly something comes to the surface and it's like it's bubbling up. And at that moment, it interferes with me listening. So it can be that you want to say something, but the timing isn't right. You want to say something, the timing isn't right because someone is still processing something. Or you may say something and it triggers something, and then all of a sudden the rapport is gone and you can see someone drift off. That's why it's so important to look at facial expressions, because when you look at facial expressions, you can see how someone is perceiving the information. And maybe even more important than being looked at as the one who's talking to you, it's about looking at the receiving party. So you can actually see what's happening. Are they understanding it? Does it trigger something? Are they emotional about it? Is it like with a flat, straight face and that's it? So does it really actually land? Those are things you can tell just based by looking at them. Now, there is the part where you might be talking to someone and they don't understand it. And that actually might be way more common than you think. And when the other doesn't understand you, you can keep talking, but at that moment, there is like, what could the other person mean? And they might be searching for comparable things, searching for answers like, how does this person mean it? But if you keep going on, they cannot ask. There's not a moment where they can come in. So if they are not capable of writing it down or anything, or maybe they cannot even continue on before they actually understood what you said, then it's over and done with. And remember what I said when I talked about this paper boat. The mere fact that I had to put the folded crease on the top instead of the top and the bottom part of the paper made all the difference. It looked the same. I would almost say it talked like a duck and it walked like a duck, but well, it's a paper boat. But the result was absolutely, completely different. So I got stuck. And if someone is saying something and you're trying to follow, but you can't really grasp it, then what happens? You get stuck, literally. And what's needed is clarification. But if you don't get the clarification, or you're not even hearing that clarification anymore because you're so absorbed by, but what does the other one mean? How have I, all those thoughts to see if you can relate to it. And if that doesn't happen, then someone zones out. Now, someone at that moment can try to interrupt you. So they are being heard, seen, and understood. Same like when I said, you can be triggered. And, all of a sudden you're thinking about things and you want to get that off your chest so you can listen again, which it's like this obstacle that needs to be fixed first. And it can also be that someone actually was sharing something with you when you came in and they were like, okay, do you have some time? Yeah, I do. And, but I want to share something with you first. And then you say something and the other one isn't paying attention to it because they're like, okay, you're finishing up something, doesn't involve me. But maybe even when it doesn't involve you, the other needs to get it off their chest and they need to be heard. Also, it can be about you're coming in and it's like, yeah, but hang on. And if there's something unresolved, especially when we're talking between two parties, that's not going to land very well either, because, well, it's about being open and connected. And when one of the parties is not being heard, whether it's during the conversation or prior to the conversation, then there's a disconnect. So the things that you want to look for is not just the facial expressions, but when you have said what you wanted to say, what happens? So if you've been talking for a long while, and chances are the other one is like, so make sure that the other one can absorb, maybe confirm, see if they're listening, and ask them to reflect back. So what's your opinion about this? How do you feel about this? And that's a very quick way to actually see if the person has understood you or not, and if the message has landed or not. And there are people who are like, okay, I said what I wanted to say, and then the other sits across from you. They just look at you, blank stare. They might say yes, and then it's okay, bye, and that's it. Now, if that happens, then you don't know if the thing that you were saying actually has landed. That's why it's so important to actually get feedback. It happens quite often that I say something to someone and then they woke off and I'm like, did you actually hear me? And I'll be with someone else and I'll look at them. Do you think they actually heard me? And then I might actually text it again because I'm not sure if the person has heard me. And that's why we're talking about it's a two-way street. So it's not just sending, it's also receiving, and then letting someone know that you have received it and it was done in a way that was comprehensible. I mean, if someone says something to you and you perceive it in a different way, whether it's because it's suddenly Morse code or there's too much noise, you want to know. Now, every once in a while, I will be in a situation where it's very noisy, and then I think I might have understood, and then someone might say to me, well, I actually said this, and I said, oh, sorry, I misunderstood you. It happens. And it might also happen that I might actually literally almost crawl into the other person because there's so much noise, just to make sense of it. And then I'll say, I'm sorry, but it's hard to understand. There's so much noise. And when there's a lot of music involved and there are other people are talking, I so easily get distracted. And especially if someone is talking to me in a low voice, chances are that I'm actually picking up on the conversation on another table. And so I want to listen, but it can be very hard. And just sharing that can already make a lot of difference. So the friend that I usually have dinner with on a regular basis, we talk about those things and we say, okay, it's hard to hear what you're saying right now because of the noise. And we look for a table that might be a little less noisy so we can actually understand one another. So, but getting back to the three things besides observing the person and taking a break, pausing, so the other can respond back, and also responding back, so you know, like, hey, okay, has someone received it the way I meant it to be? Remember, it's about, is someone occupied? If someone is occupied, probably things won't land. Are you being understood? If they don't understand you, things probably won't land. Are they in need of being heard, seen, and understood themselves? If so, things probably won't land. Now, I also said there are a few tiny changes you can make. So let's start with a very simple one. And that's mindset. So if you've been listening to me and you're like, yeah, I know that, then my question to you is, so have you been in a situation like this and you still are convinced that if you said it once or twice or thrice or 4 times, that it's no use to repeat it again, then maybe we should have a little conversation, because then we're talking about mindset. So I actually do hope that you've taken notes while I was talking about this, and probably you have some questions or not. And if something popped up with regards to a situation in your life, then hopefully you've written something down so you can come back to that person and talk about it. So things already get improved. But again, there are also people who say, I cannot be changed. I'm this age. I've done it all this time like this. It's done. Especially people on the spectrum might say so. And the question, of course, is how true is that? Now, when it comes to people on the spectrum, when there's a lot of noise, whether we're talking about audible noise or visual noise, anything that distracts them, and especially when they are in a hurry, so basically we get back to being occupied in one way or another, chances are it won't land. It just won't. But does that mean there is nothing they can do? Well, there are some things that can be done, and that's why we talk about tiny step changes. And because of that, I've showed you this before. I've made this handout, and the third part on this end is about communication. So I wrote a few things down, and one of them has to do with the part where we talk about being authentic and connected. And in order to be so and do so, it's about getting across your message with a certain clarity. Now, I know what it's like to go from left to right and up and down and inside, outside, and back. So because I know, I do my best to get back to the main message. So I always will come back to what I had in mind, so it makes sense to people again. So clarity is very important. So if I know I'm going to go off the deep end, or it just happens, and yes, it does happen occasionally on my end, well, more than not. And some people are very good, they know me and they can follow me. And others, well, I know I need to get back and then explain why I said all the things that I did. So clarity is important. Why are you saying something? What are you getting across? And how does this make sense in the entire conversation? Now, the second thing is mutual respect. We talked about taking the time for someone else. And the question is, say that you have a conversation with a friend, or maybe you are a manager and you're talking to a team member. Do you actually have time to also listen if your team member is actually picking up on what you are saying? And maybe you are the team member and you're listening to this and you're like, oh, yeah, I recognize that. I've got a manager and he or she is not listening to me. Then, this might be something to consider. Like the next time that person approaches you and wants to say something, then maybe in advance you can ask for some extra time. That's why I personally love it when you have a meeting, when you can get your things, the things that you want to discuss, that you know are important, that you get them in before anything starts. So when I have a meeting and I organize it, I might already have put down some things, sent it to people, and then I will ask, are there other things that we need to discuss which are not on the list? Now, when you're talking one-on-one with someone, you already might want to make a list, but of course, you can also ask at the end, which I also do with every meeting. When I'm the one who precedes that meeting, I will ask, okay, is there anything else that we've forgotten? Okay, so you know that everyone has a voice. And especially when it comes to teaching, and you want feedback, you want it to be something that is back and forth, I will look around the room and I will call on the person who hasn't said a thing. Whether it's because they didn't know when to say something or because they are too shy about it. I want to know, okay, what's going on in your mind, because I haven't heard you yet. So I invite someone to say something. And basically, you would think, well, communication, two-way street. If you have a one-on-one conversation, combined, that's two. Then two people get to speak, right? Well, I wish that was true, because often it's not. And like I said, if you are a manager and you want to have a meeting with someone, then don't assume that they agree with you because they haven't said anything, because they kept silent. And don't assume that they didn't have anything to share because they didn't say anything in return, simply because you didn't ask. Or maybe you asked and then you were like, oh, well, you don't have anything, right? And then, because I need to go. Where's the time for the other to respond? Do you leave any time? Now, I talked about neurodivergence quite a lot in my past sessions. And one of the things when it comes to neurodivergence, so whether people who are on the spectrum, ADHD, gifted, basically those who are wired differently, they are thinking about which answer should I be giving, or how can I say this best? And it might take a few moments. And if you don't have the time to really listen to them and they feel rushed, the answer won't come. You might actually interrupt them already. And for me personally, I can be very sensitive to it. So when someone comes up with a question, I will say to them, I need a moment to think about this. Because if I really want to know, then I need to go deep. So first I need to play with that question and then really feel like, okay, this is what the person is asking. And then it's like going down some data banks or whatever it is until it's like, oh yeah, so what do I do? And then I come up with an answer. So I might say I need a bit of time to process this to give you the correct answer. And when someone is sitting like, well, I feel rushed, especially if I know they have little time, and I'll say, I'm sorry, I can't, I've got brain fog right now, because that's what happens when you put me on the spot. I might get brain fog. And I'm not so much talking about something to share in general. I mean, if it's about, can you give a speech to someone, I probably can do it. But if you really ask me about something that is really important to me, or something that I might not have thought about before, then yeah, it might take a few minutes before I'm like, okay, yeah. And then I'll come up with the answer. Probably less than a few minutes, but it feels like an eternity. If you're on the receiving end and you're like, someone wants an answer from me and they want it now, but And of course, you can say to the person asking something like, you know what, I'll get back to you. And you'll send them a message, whether it's email or text message or whatever. So mutual respect is important, and being open about what you share. So not only open to receiving input and seeing what's going on, but also being open and willing to share can be so important too. And well, just like mutual respect, we also want mutual understanding. So these are the basics for any meeting, basically, to be understood. Now, you can say, I've done things like this, so there's no way I'm going to change. But, you know, how hard is it to actually look at someone and to see if they actually picked up on something? And if we talk about this, then the question, of course, also is, are you really open to listening to what the other person has to say? Now, then there are some other things which are here under micro meetings, because meetings don't have to take really long. Not if you do it on a regular basis. The first time, of course, yes, but on a regular basis, no. So if you're asking someone something, then the way to do it is to make sure that the other has the time to respond back. And if someone is saying something to you, then make sure to repeat back what you have heard. So if you say, I said something to someone and, well, didn't land, and maybe besides, if they are being occupied, they don't understand you, or they don't feel heard, well, let's get into that part of not being heard. So maybe they wanted to say something to you, but it had no use. And then basically they were looking at you. Nothing. Just doesn't land. Just doesn't. And so don't be surprised that you have to repeat it again and still nothing. But by the time that happens, how about if you were going to ask about it? Like, okay, I've told this to you before. So what's your line of thought? What's your train of thought? What's going on in your mind? Do you agree? Don't you agree? And then you invite someone to respond back. So when I talk about the arc, what else? It's about the ask. So you're asking someone something, and then you want them to respond back. So you invite them to respond back, and then they can repeat back what they've heard, what matters most to them. And then by doing it in their own words, and you can actually hear, like, okay, now they're going on about something totally different, or yeah, this is what I meant, you actually can get the answer. And what you want after is basically a consensus, because we said it's about being connected. So you want to get a confirmation that whatever it is that you wanted or needed or still do, that the other one actually understood what was needed. And vice versa, if the other one comes to you and comes with an ask, then it's up to you to respond back, to repeat it back in a way that they know that you actually heard them, and then see what's happening. So if you have an ask, is the other one confirming that they heard you and that they're willing to do something about it? And like I said, I've been in so many situations, and it still happens, that I ask someone for something, and then something happens and the person just goes off, and I'm like, did it land? Did you register it? Or maybe for a second and then you forgot about it again. So that confirmation is important. You don't want a blank stare or no. You want, okay, so what are you going to do? Be clear, get clarity. And then, of course, what else is needed is the part where maybe in order to do what you would like them to do, they need something more from you. Or when they come to you and they ask you something, you need a little more from them in order to be able to do so. So don't hold back if it's important and if it's relevant to the topic, but express it. And it seems so, well, I would say it might seem basic, but let's face it. So it's not that basic. It's not something that happens in every conversation. So I want to ask you, how do you go into meetings? Now, getting back to, but what if you're telling me, like, well, I've said it once, twice, thrice, it's like, then what can you do to change this? And I talked about the arc, what else? So did you actually make sure that the other person responded back? And did you actually get confirmation that what it is that you need, that when they're going to do it or who they're going to ask, instead of just a nod? You want it to be clear, you want it to be specific, and that's why when it's certainly when it comes to meetings, it's about accountability here. Who is going to be the owner? What is the one-liner of the thing that you want, and when is the deadline? I talked about tiny step changes. So this is not about adjusting who you are, but is it fair to say, I can't change it all? Maybe there is a little something that you can do. And that's why we talk about accountability. If you just want to talk to someone for the sake of talking and then hoping that they do it, you might as well talk to a doll. You might as well talk to your phone and just use the recording part and then say it. But if you really want connection, then, well, you need to do a little bit more. And don't think like, oh, they know what I'm talking about. You don't know. You don't know what their reference is, or how much they know about it, if it's new to them. Or maybe they have done it more often, but something is just a little bit different compared to normal. So just ask, check. Is this okay with you? Do you know what you need to do? So tell me, what are you going to do? And if you do this on a regular basis, well, I can promise you that a lot less going back and forth is needed in order to clarify things. What is going to go back and forth are things like, well, I couldn't do this because, or hey, I had a talk with someone and they come up with, and then you can see what's part of the scope and within reach or not. So it doesn't have to be that hard, and especially when you're using a structure and you intend to use that structure every time, then you are predictable. It's predictable for the other person, and they know what to expect, and that makes a lot of difference. Now, getting back again one more time to, well, I've said it before, I'm not going to say it again. Again, I will ask you, did your message land? Or did you have an ask, but the other one wasn't capable of doing something with it because there was something else that they needed to fix first, that they needed to get okay with first. So if there's an emotional thing attached to that one thing that you ask, well, then maybe it sounds so simple, but in reality, it isn't. And to give you a very simple example, when years ago I twisted my ankle on a brick, I couldn't stand on 2 feet anymore. I walked on a foot and a few toes. My house is a big house, and we had lots of plants, and there I would go to water the plants, and I would have this jar or whatever it was, and I would go back and forth a few times. But the moment that I was standing on a foot and a few toes, well, that was quite different. I couldn't do it anymore. So the expectations were the same, but the results, they were different because I just simply couldn't do it anymore. And if you don't take certain circumstances into consideration, then you might actually be disappointed. And then it's important to actually talk about, hey, what has changed? Or if something pivotal happens, like, hey, how's this going to affect us? How's this going to influence us? What do we need to do? So I can tell you that ever since, things changed drastically, because the things I was able to do, I wasn't able to do anymore. And it basically meant that I started living downstairs because I couldn't go up 2 stairs to my room anymore because, well, going up the stairs and down the stairs was kind of hard too. So communication, it sounds simple. It's one of the things we do on a daily basis. But the next time that you're having a conversation with someone or you want to express something, then make sure that you take their circumstances into consideration too. So maybe if you send a text message, ask a little bit on, maybe explain why you need a little something. and be respectful, say thank you. Don't just tell them, don't just order them around. It's, it's important to be that person that if you ask something, they're like, oh yeah, sure, we're going to do it. Because they know that you are the one who has an open door policy, or when they have questions, they can send you a message. But basically you hear them. And, that really helps when you want to get things done, because people are more willing to do something for someone they feel connected to than someone who just occasionally drops by, or maybe every day drops by, says something, and then disappears again. And, well, the risk you're running is when you don't know if someone has actually understood you, is that you don't know if that one thing that you asked is actually going to get done, or if they actually agree with you. And you might be sending a different message after that conversation to someone else in the organization or the community or whatever it is, than that same person is doing, because that same person might not have agreed with you, but they are like, because this is not going to work out. Now, if you are kind of curious about this handout is about bridging the communication gap. Then find it. I'll make sure it will be available on ladylexi.com. So if you have something that you need to have resolved because you are like, something is not going well within my organization, and especially when it's costing you revenue because things go slower than you expected them to, or with certain things that are not being met, and what you expected to be able to be done by a number of people for some reason doesn't line up, then there is a communication gap. There's something that you don't know, what you are missing, and that needs to be addressed. So you can download this handout and go over the ideas that you have about certain things and check them if they are true. You can also talk about how can you get more clarity, and what is it that you are capable of, or what the other one is capable of. Sometimes we're better at things than we actually realize. And it's also about the way to communicate, including such a thing as be specific. I'm going to do, or I'm doing, or I can't do this because I'm blocked by, or I need from you by then because a lot of times when you talk to people, that doesn't mean that they're going to do it straight away, especially not if you haven't said to them how urgent it is. So, and there are the rules of respect on there, like, hey, ask, don't assume, always look and listen. Each party gets their time and their turn to speak. So not only their turn, but especially also the time. And use the timer, don't rush it, and honor each turn. And when you know that it's going to be like a micro meeting, so a few minutes, but it's on a regular basis, then so many things just change really quickly, because at some point you just have to look at one another and you already know, okay, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. And then when you say, yeah, I got it, then you've got it. And if you don't get it, don't say it, but say, okay, well, I need to come back to you when you have some more time because I'm missing something. So that open communication and clarity, it's so important. Now, to finish off with this, there's Bunny in the boat. And like I said, the boat has a message, and the message is actually on here, which is one tiny step forward, because that's the message of today's live. And remember, it's about communication and doing so with intent. So always be intentional. Know what you want to talk about, and also share what it is that you want to talk about. Be calm, and more importantly, be present. And yes, I know that I started off by sharing a story where I said, a friend of mine, and when we sit together across the table, which we do on a weekly basis, we might be actually playing a game together, or we might be coloring something, but we do pay attention to one another. And that's what I mean. Be present, be there. And, there's no better way than if you do so on a regular basis and you're really there. You might be surprised at what it does for the connection between the two of you. Because even when you're not friends, the mere fact that someone knows, if I'm going to that person, then I know I can rely on that person to get back to me. That's what makes all the difference. Now, let me know what it is that you are going to change. Listen to this if needed. And if you've got some questions, find me. And otherwise, find me on ladylexi.com. I'll make sure that you know where to find this. I will write a blog post about it as well. And I'll make sure there's a direct link in the description. And if it's not, then say, Lexi, that description, where is it? Instead of, because silence, well, some people may prefer silence, but that doesn't mean that it creates clarity. But then again, a lot of talking doesn't create clarity either. And having said so, I can go on, but I don't know if that's going to contribute much. So check ladylexi.com or go to Instagram. Lady Lexi Speaks Up, and send a message which says handout or funnel, or in this case, communication gap. And there was a lot of words, so I'll make sure that you'll know where to find it and what to do. Okay, I'll get back to you soon. And again, if you have questions, just let me know. And otherwise, just check out what's out there. If you want to have a free system scan, which is based on this, so that's basically a 40-minute talk where we actually go through this together, then use the word system scan, and I'll make sure that we get together. So if you message me and you leave an email address, then I'll make sure that I'll get back to you. So I'm curious what the first thing is that you are going to do, and try. And don't tell me I'm fixed the way I am, because tiny step changes, if you really want to change, they're always possible.